The thing I like about Celeste is when she called me and asked me to do this, she said, I don't know if you remember me, but we've got an old car out in our junkyard that's got a Dahl for Senate sign on the bumper still, and that was back in 1992 when I was the Republican candidate who ran against Harry Reid. And part of my stump speech in those days was, if we don't get him now, we'll never get him. It was pretty prophetic. We've learned some important things today, and we learned a lot of important things from Karen. I've known Karen for a long time, and I'm coming from a different direction than what you've been hearing so far about working with and trying to figure things out with the agency. How many of you met with the National Riparian Service Team when they came around a couple of years ago? Probably some of your county commissions did, and they were under contract with the BLM and the Forest Service to pour oil on the water and try to bring peace to some of the issues between the users and the agencies. And they wanted to come to Carson City and meet with us, two of us from NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties, and we had 2 staff members there. And they came and said, our task is to meet with all of the people that we can and all of the organizations that we can who have a difference with the agencies. And then we want to take that back to the agencies, and then we want to bring word from them to you, and we want to work this out so that we can all understand each other better, and then we can get along better. And so they started telling us about how they were, you know, the rest of the process. And I said, you know, there are some good people in the agencies. I have some good friends in the agencies. We can work with some of them. But it's just too late. You just got here too late. There isn't any way to work this out. The gap is too wide and we can't bridge it. And we had just finished our Nevada Land Use Management Task Force process in Nevada, where we had met for a year to try to decide where we were and what we're going to do, and I've got to give you a little bit of history on how that happened. When in 2009, the Forest Service came to our county commission and they said, we're going to do a travel management plan, and we don't plan on closing any roads in your county, and we want you to sign on as a cooperating agency. And we said, okay, fine, we'll do that if you're not going to close any roads. We found out within 2 weeks that indeed they were going to close over 1,000 miles of road. And we say over 1,000 because actually it was over 1,500, and people think you're exaggerating when you say that, so we just use 1,000. And because they were going to close the roads, and because we started pushing back, we said, incorporated our land use plan. Karen was here talking about the importance of land use plans. We said incorporate our land use plans into this travel management plan. And we also want to hire a facilitator from up at the college. We want Forest Service to pay half of the fee for the facilitator, so that the facilitator will be the Forest Service will be bought into the process. We documented 104 contacts with the Forest Service over a 2-year period. We did everything we could to try to work with them, and we couldn't. We didn't make any progress. And because of our pushback, then I got invited to go to Washington and testify before Rob Bishop's subcommittee Natural Resource Subcommittee, and with the help of our congressman, we talked Bishop into bringing that subcommittee to Elko. And some of you remember, we had 64 counties from around the West involved in supporting us with letters or resolutions or testimony. We finished, and the Forest Service went ahead and they did just exactly what they were going to do, and they didn't give an inch. And they thumbed their nose at the congressional committee, at us, at the 64 counties that supported us. And so I got with a county commissioner in southern Utah, and I said, hey, what are we going to do to get some local control? We decided to put an organization together called the American Lands Council. And Alan Gardner reminded me to tell you that there's some ALC literature back there. Get it before you go. Okay, so then when we put that together, I went to one of our state senators, Pete Gogachia, and he and I went to our Legislative Council Bureau, and we said we want to do the same thing in the Nevada, the 148 bill that was talked about this morning, where the land is going to be transferred to the state. Our Legislative Council Bureau said we think that would be unconstitutional. We'd have to issue a letter of unconstitutionality with it. And Pete Gogachia said, all right, let's do this. Let's just pretend that the transfer has taken place, and let's study the implications of that transfer. And so we got a bill passed through our legislature, AB 227, that created a task force to study the implications of the transfer of the public land from the federal government to the state. There were, on that task force was one member of every county commission in the state, 17 of us. The first time we met, they elected me chair, and I said, let's not vote on anything until we get a lot of information. Except for one thing. How many of you think it's a good idea to transfer the public land from the federal government to the state? And more than half thought it was not a good idea. So we started out by contracting for an economic analysis which showed us that if the state of Nevada owned and managed its own land, we could expect a net revenue to the state of $350 million a year. We had all of the state agency people come in and tell us to get from where we are now to where we need to be in order to manage our public lands. What do we need to do? And we figured out that it wasn't that big of a step. And then we started getting all of the stakeholders that we could to come and make presentations to us. We had 1 year to do this, and then we were to report to the legislature on our findings. We met for 13 times, and we had all of the stakeholders that we could cram into the time that we had. The Sierra Club, the Farm Bureau, the sportsmen, we had everybody. And as we went along, we started to come to some kind of an agreement on where do we want to be? What are we going to come up with when we have finished this? And we started coming up with things like we want to make sure that all of the valid existing rights transfer. In other words, anything that you can do on the public land today, we want to make sure you're going to be able to do that after the transfer. If you can hunt, if you can fish, if you can camp, if you can graze, if you can mine, then we want to make sure you're going to be able to do that afterwards. Do we want to sell the public land? Well, some of it, but for the most part, it won't be sold. It will continue to be public land. So when the Sierra Club, the president of the Sierra Club in Nevada came and presented to us, before he did, he had sent his PowerPoint presentation in advance. I got a chance to look at it. And so before he did his presentation, I said, we haven't voted on things yet, but I just want to tell you where I think we are as a task force. And if I'm wrong, then any of you on the task force just speak up and say so. But I think we agree on a number of things already, even though we haven't voted on it. And I started going down through this list. Whatever you can do now, you're going to do then. We're not going to sell at all. and so on. And so when it came time for his presentation, he said, you know, I thought we were going to be in total disagreement with what you're doing, but he said, my only concern now is we think that we can't trust the state to do all the things that you say the state's going to do. So anyway, we did our report, which was a resolution that we sent to the legislatures, became Senate Joint Resolution number 1. It was interesting as we went through that year to just watch the lights come on as people began to really understand the issue, to understand what it's like out there now and the problems that the federal government has in trying to manage the public land and what a bad job they do of it, and the potential for the state to do it and how the state could do it and the benefits from having that management. Holy cow. I've only got 5 minutes left. Oh, man. Anyway, we put that resolution together. It went to our legislature, passed both houses of the legislature. The governor signed it. Our congressman took it to Washington, introduced it as 1484. It's a bill in Congress calling for the transfer of the public land from the federal government to the state of Nevada. I went back and testified on that on the 26th before Congressman Stewart's committee, and we have here Brian Steed, who's from the Congressman's Committee today that you're going to be hearing from. It's a bill that whose time has come, I think. It's the only one that is specific to a state for the transfer of the bill in the state, and there are some challenges that go with it. How we're going to make that transfer, how the valid existing rights are going to transfer. My cowboy friends, my rancher friends are concerned that in Nevada, you know, most of our population is in Las Vegas, and they say, okay, what's going to happen when Las Vegas starts running things for us up north, and they raise our grazing fees so high we're not going to be able to stay in business? And my answer to them is, when the legislature meets, you need to go down there and get with them and go in and visit with them. And you'll find out that, yeah, there's some jerks down there, but there are a lot of good people too. And even those on the other side of the aisle have a concern for what happens in the rest of the state. And you'll find out that it's a lot easier to work with them than it is to go back to Washington, D.C. along the Potomac and work with the people who generally most of them are not elected, and try to work something out with them that, as opposed to being able to go down and when we were passing AB 227, I was down there kind of going through the halls and working on getting support for the AB 227, which created our task force. I went by the Senate Majority Leader's office, who was a Democrat. And I thought, you know, just for duck soup, I think I'll stop in there and see if I can see him. And I went in and I talked to the gal out in the front, and she said, no, he's busy. And so I started out and I said, well, tell him that Demar Dahl was here. And he stepped around the corner and he said, wait a minute, what'd you say your last name was? And I told him, and he said, do you know Harvey Dahl? And I said, yeah, I did. Before he died, he was my father, still my father, but he's gone. And he said, well, I love that man. Come on in here. And anyway, he became one of our strong supporters. And I said, you'll go down there, you'll find out when you start meeting with these people in the legislature that they're people that you can talk to. You might even find out you're related to some of them. And anyway, I'm out of time. Do I have any time for questions, Celeste, or is that it? I can take one question. She runs a tight ship. All right. Okay, well, anyway, AB 220, House Bill 1484. Get familiar with that. I was going to bring a copy of our Nevada Land Management Task Force report. You can get that on nvnaco.org under Natural Resource tab and final report. That's the template for 1484, which is the bill to transfer the land. Get the bill, the amended bill, to transfer the land, and that's our only answer. You know, we have been cooperating agencies, coordinating agencies. We have done everything that we can do to, and look where we are now. Look how far away from where we are from where we need to be. The only answer is big enough, is to transfer the public land from the federal government to the state of Nevada. I've got a question, Celeste.
You can answer. I heard that Idaho had done a study and said it would cost their state. They would go in the red if they were to take over.
Go to nvnaco.org, read our study, because Idaho's study is in there, and that will explain. It will explain why they say that, and the difference. Yeah. All right. Thank you. All right.